Twitter changes, indeed breaks its own rules just to get rid of a user the executives don't like. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. In part 2 of the Twitter files subsequence the suspension of Donald Trump, Michael Shellenberger discusses Twitter's rule change. Twitter had to change its rules to excuse, it could never justify, suspending or banning the Donald Trump account. When they did that, Twitter management compromised Twitter's value as an historical archive. Only Elon Musk's reinstatement of the Trump account and other accounts has repaired this fault. Furthermore, when rules can change on the fly, justice is no longer an issue of rules, but one of personalities. That one fact made Twitter the crime scene Elon Musk called it yesterday, and I have a link into his tweet in the description. Before we unpack this latest gift, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. On some great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I've chosen for today, which is a portrait of Donald Trump with this caption, "The Great MAGA King." Yes, it's a repeat, but this is actually part 2 of a sequence. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, as long as it's legal tender. Hey, first some background. In 2018, doubtless in response to the Trump derangement syndrome that plagued Twitter even then, the Twitter policy team dropped a thread to explain about the treatment of world leaders. I have links in the description to 3 tweets from that thread, so you can see it all. Quote, new blog, World Leaders on Twitter. There's been a lot of discussion about political figures and world leaders on Twitter, and we want to share our stance. Twitter is here to serve and help advance the global public conversation. Elected world leaders play a critical role in that conversation because of their outsized impact on our society. Blocking a world leader from Twitter or removing their controversial tweets would hide important information people should be able to see and debate. It would also not silence that leader, but it would certainly hamper necessary discussion around their words and actions. We review tweets by leaders within the political context that defines them and enforce our rules accordingly. No one person's account drives Twitter's growth or influences these decisions. We work hard to remain unbiased with the public interest in mind. We are working to make Twitter the best place to be, to see and freely discuss everything that matters. We believe that's the best way to help our society make progress. Close quote. This offended some of Twitter's most Trump-deranged account holders, one of whom articulated one of the earliest cancer culture rationales that I've ever seen. He speaks of a cynical calculus that Trump makes money for the platform while his acts are to the detriment of the world. Almost 5 years later, someone has now observed pithily, right, Twitter died right after he was kicked off. I have a link in the description to his tweet. Bear this in mind when digesting Michael Shellenberger's thread, which we can call the Twitter Files Part 4. The thread has 39 tweets, and I've left links in the description to 20 of them, which is every other one. This dropped yesterday evening, beginning at 3:28 p.m. Pacific Time. Quote, Twitter Files, Part 4, The Removal of Donald Trump, January 7th. As the pressure builds, Twitter executives build the case for a permanent ban. On January 7th, senior Twitter executives create justifications to ban Trump, seek a change of policy for Trump alone, distinct from other political leaders, and express no concern for the free speech or democracy implications of a ban. This Twitter Files is reported with Mr. Leighton Woodhouse. Unquote, Mr. Shellenberger, who then adds links to Twitter Files threads 1, 2, and 3 for review. Then he continues, quote, for years, Twitter has resisted calls to ban Trump. Blocking a world leader from Trump, it wrote in 2018, would hide important info and hamper necessary discussion around their words and actions, unquote. But after the events of January 6th, the internal and external pressure on Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey grows. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, tech journalist Kara Swisher, the Anti-Defamation League, high-tech venture capitalist Chris Sacca, and many others publicly called on Twitter to permanently ban Trump. Dorsey was on vacation in French Polynesia the week of January 4th through 8th, 2021. He phoned into meetings, but also delegated much of the handling of the situation to senior executives Yoel Roth, Twitter's global head of trust and safety, and Vijaya Gadde, head of legal policy and trust. As context, it's important to understand that Twitter staff and senior execs were overwhelmingly progressive. In 2018, 2020, and 2022, 96, 98, and 99% of Twitter staff's political donations went to Democrats. In 2017, Roth tweeted that there were actual National Socialists in the White House. And by the way, in April 2022, Roth told a colleague that his goal is to drive change in the world, which is why he decided not to become an academic. On January 7th, Jack Dorsey emails employees saying Twitter needs to remain consistent in its policies, including the right of users to return to Twitter after a temporary suspension. After, Roth reassures an employee that people who care about this aren't happy with where we are. Around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, Roth DMs, meaning sends a direct message to his colleagues, with news that he is excited to share. Guess what, he writes. Jack just approved repeat offender for civic integrity. The new approach would create a system where 5 violations, or strikes, would result in permanent suspension. I've talked about that before. Progress, exclaims a member of Roth's trust and safety team. The exchange between Roth and his colleagues makes clear that they had been pushing Jack Dorsey for greater restrictions on the speech Twitter allows around elections. The colleague wants to know if the decision means Trump can finally be banned. The person asks, does the incitement to violence aspect change that calculus? Roth says it doesn't. Trump continues to just have his one strike remaining. Roth's colleagues' query about incitement to violence heavily foreshadows what will happen the following day. On January 8th, Twitter will announce a permanent ban on Trump due to the risk of further incitement of violence. On J8, Twitter says the ban is based on specifically how Trump's tweets are being received and interpreted. But in 2019, Twitter said it did not attempt to determine all potential interpretations of the content or its intent. The only serious concern we found expressed within Twitter over the implications for free speech and democracy of banning Trump came from a junior person in the organization. It was tucked away in a lower-level Slack channel known as Site Integrity Auto. He said, quote, "This might be an unpopular opinion, but One-off ad hoc decisions like this that don't appear rooted in policy are, in my humble opinion, a slippery slope. This now appears to be a fiat by an online platform CEO with a global presence that can gatekeep speech for the entire world. Close quote. Now, Twitter employees use the term one-off frequently in their Slack discussions. Its frequent use reveals significant employee discretion over when and whether to apply warning labels on tweets and strikes on users. Here are typical examples with the two embedded images detailing those. Recall from Twitter Files 2 by Barry Weiss that according to Twitter staff, we control visibility quite a bit and we control the amplification of your content quite a bit, and normal people do not know how much we do. Close quote. Let's pause right here. First, because I want you to let that sink in. And second, because I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, continuing with the thread. Twitter employees recognize the difference between their own politics and Twitter's terms of service, but they also engage in complex interpretations of content in order to stamp out prohibited tweets, as a series of exchanges over the Stop the Steal hashtag reveal. Roth immediately DMs a colleague, we still don't know who that is, by the way, to ask that they add Stop the Steal and QAnon conspiracy term Kraken to a blacklist of terms to be de-amplified. Roth's colleague objects that blacklisting Stop the Steal risks de-amplifying counter-speech that validates the election. Indeed, notes Roth's colleague, a quick search of top Stop the Steal tweets turns out that they're counter-speech. But they quickly come up with a solution. De-amplify accounts with Stop the Steal in the name or profile, since those are not affiliated with counterspeech. But turns out that even blacklisting Kraken is less straightforward than they thought. That's because Kraken, in addition to being a QAnon conspiracy theory based on the mythical Norwegian sea monster, is also the name of a cryptocurrency exchange and was thus allow listed. Employees struggle with whether to punish users who share screenshots of Trump's deleted J6 tweets. We should bounce these tweets with a strike given the screenshot violates the policy, says one. But they are criticizing Trump, so I am a bit hesitant with applying strike to this user, says another. Well, what if a user dislikes Trump and objects to Twitter's censorship? The tweet still gets deleted. But since the intention is not to deny the election result, no punishing strike is applied. And at the end, if there are instances where the intent is unclear, please feel free to raise. Around noon, a confused senior executive in advertising sales sends a DM to Roth. Sales exec, Jack Dorsey says, we will permanently suspend Trump if our policies are violated after a 12-hour account lock. Now, what policies is Jack talking about? Roth, any policy violation. What happens next is essential to understanding how Twitter justified banning Trump. Sales exec, are we dropping the public interest policy now? Roth, 6 hours later, in this specific case, we're changing our public interest approach for his account. Bingo. Moving on. The ad exec is referring to Twitter's policy of public interest exceptions, which allows the content of elected officials, even if it violates Twitter rules, if it directly contributes to understanding or discussion of a matter of public concern. Roth pushes for a permanent suspension of Representative Matt Gaetz, even though it doesn't quite fit anywhere. Duh. It's a kind of test case for the rationale for banning Trump. I'm trying to talk Twitter's safety team into removal as a conspiracy that incites violence. Around 2:30, comms execs DM Roth to say they don't want to make a big deal of the QAnon ban to the media because they fear if we push this, it looks like we're trying to offer up something in place of the thing everyone wants, meaning a Trump ban. That evening, a Twitter engineer DMs to Roth to say, I feel a lot of debates around exceptions stem from the fact that Trump's account is not technically different from anybody else's and yet treated differently due to his personal status, without corresponding Twitter rules to clarify the responsibilities that should come with that status. Roth's response hints at how Twitter will justify deviating from its long-standing policy. To put a different spin on it, policy is one part of the system of how Twitter works. We ran into the world changing faster than we were able to either adapt the product or the policy. The evening of January 7th, the same junior employee who expressed an unpopular opinion about ad hoc decisions that don't appear rooted in policy speaks up one last time before the end of the day. Earlier that day, that employee had written, my concern is specifically surrounding the unarticulated logic of the decision by Facebook. That's the space that fills with the idea, conspiracy theory. That's all. Internet moguls sit around like kings, casually deciding what people can and cannot see. The employee notes later in the day, and Will Oramus noticed the inconsistency too, linking to an article for 10 at Medium called Facebook Chucked Its Own Rulebook to Ban Trump. The underlying problem, writes Will Oramus, is that the dominant platforms have always been loath to own up to their own subjectivity because it highlights the extraordinary, unfettered power they wield over the global public square and places the responsibility for that power on their own shoulders. So they hide behind an ever-changing rule book, alternately pointing to it when it's convenient and shoving it under the nearest rug when it isn't. Facebook's suspension of Trump now puts Twitter in an awkward position. If Trump does indeed return to Twitter, the pressure on Twitter will ramp up to find a pretext on which to ban him as well. Indeed. And as Barry Weiss will show tomorrow, that's exactly what happened. Unquote, Michael Shellenberger. As Mr. Shellenberger was posting the thread, outraged users weighed in immediately. One said of that junior member who warned of the implications, give that man a promotion. I have a link to that tweet in the description. Many other users seconded that recommendation, and another observed that at least one person understood the meaning of the United States Constitution. Again, link in the description. Finally, I have a link from an attorney named Eric Sell of an outfit calling itself the Center for American Liberty. He actually left several tweets in outraged reaction at various posts in the thread. The link I'm leaving for you is his closing link to thank Mr. Shellenberger and to announce what his organization can do for anyone facing big tech censorship. To be sure, a few users held forth that Trump incited the January 6th, quote, riots, unquote, that he was a dangerous man, etc., etc., but most did not. Now, in closing, this thread, even more than the earlier one, shows that Twitter deliberately changed its own rules. We see here an organization changing rules hour by hour Matt Taibbi hinted 2 days ago that the final result was a discarding of rules, and rules by executive fiat. To those who insist that it's a private company, well, first, that's not true. Twitter became a state actor, and we know who gave Twitter its marching orders. Second, any platform ruling by fiat is no less tyrannical than is a civil authoritarian. To paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, a chief moderator whose character is thus marked by every act that might define a tyrant does not deserve the business or custom of free users. Link in the description to the article, to that short thread describing an article, to Elon Musk calling it a crime scene, to the short thread describing what Twitter's policy once was, to the brief exchange with the first hint of cancel culture, to 20 tweets from the thread released yesterday, to a total of 3 tweets in praise of the thread and outrage at the rules change, to my Declaration of Truth Twitter account, and to conservative news and views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. And on the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and a link to my Twitter War playlist, and links to 2 other videos from other influencers that are out by now, talking about this sort of thing. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.